So a little bit about me, really quickly. You probably saw my session yesterday. I'm Mike Stephenson. I am an advisor to Saravana for Serverless 360 now. What I want to do in this session, Sandro and I were having a little chat yesterday, and I showed him a little demo I did, and he 100% insisted that I needed to show everybody in this session. So I'm going to steal a couple of minutes out of my presentation just to show you guys this, because he thinks it's cool enough that everybody needs to see. So we'll do that, and then I'll jump back and show you. So, over here, we were sort of talking about in the pub the other night, and you know, actually, this really to me articulates the value of an Integrate Summit. We all sit at home working from home now. We never really chat to other integration people much. And I kind of miss that, you know, and I find I lose a bit of the inspiration and energy to just figure out new stuff and come up with cool ideas. So we're chatting in the pub the other night about mapping, and it just got me thinking about this idea. So here I've got an example of an XML at the top, and I've got my name and my golf club and some scores that I had, and I've got some JSON at the bottom. So if you notice, I did a couple of things here about, you notice I've got my full name that I've transformed first name, surname to full name. I've changed the golf club that I'm at, and then I've got in the scores, I've done some calculations to work out this net score from my gross score. So I showed Sandro this, and I'm like, right, this is how I did it. So this is my map here. And so what you've got to think is we've got this mapper tool. It's 20 years old nearly now. It was in BizTalk 2006, BizTalk 2004. And we come to mapping with this sort of mindset of a BizTalk bias. We're trying to make a pretty looking tool. But actually, what would you do if you know, we always talk about reinventing integration. Why can't I just natural language describe the transformation? And then I just threw that at ChatGTP and said, can you actually transform my XML to this JSON? So if you look at my map, I'm just saying, give me it as JSON, change the surname to last name. I didn't even specify the field names. It's just really loose. Create a new field which concatenates first name and last name with a space. Change the date formats. Can you calculate a new field called net score? By the way, my golf handicap's 7, so work out what that net score should be for my gross score. And then I used Sandro's blog post to call ChatGTP, and this is the result I got back. So actually, if you think about what that means, you could just tell it what you want your map to do, and it's kind of done it for me. So we played around a bit, and Sandro said, right, I'm using the new mapper, and I'm having a few problems, and he had this XML here. And he's like, I can't get it to work out the aggregate score for my phone calls per country. So we modified my logic app a bit, and we included the example data and the map instructions in one call. So we said, right, give us it as JSON, add a field where you calculate the person's age from their date of birth, give me the GPS coordinates for the address based on the zip code. In the phone calls array, use the phone number and look up the country that each phone call came from. Then we want you to summarize the cost of the calls based on the country. So if you look in the output JSON down here, you see I've got the GPS location. Each phone call's had the country added to it. And down the bottom, we've got a summary of the cost per country, just by writing a bit of language there. Now, so what I'm kind of hoping is, right, Microsoft, Mapper's great, but actually give us a mapping service where we can let a BA, you know, we all hate writing maps because they're boring. BAs have to write the documentation. Just let them build a map with some kind of AI service, train it with some example messages, and then we can just use it. And then that would be so much cooler as reinventing data transformation than just giving us a visual designer. And actually, just to articulate like the difference, we knocked the demo up in like 10 minutes during the break yesterday, and then if you saw Sandro and I sat at the back beavering away, laughing, mucking around, that's what we were doing, was playing with this and, you know, just seeing what we could do. So hopefully, I've shared a little video on this and a blog post, which you can see my blog's there, so hopefully other people in the room get inspired from our idea at Integrate and go and take it further, do more stuff with it, and that's what Integrate's supposed to be about. that was Sandro's face when I showed him the demo, and that was his initial reaction. He's got to start rewriting his mapping book, which made my day a bit. Okay, so the real presentation. Where are you in your BizTalk to Azure journey? So most people in the room probably have a BizTalk background, although actually, Saravana said the other day how many new people are there. So we've got people who don't come from a BizTalk background, but I think hopefully you'll still get a bit out of this session about what can Serverless 360 do for your iPaaS on Azure. So we're going to cover a couple of key areas: guidance, BAM for BizTalk, business apps, cost culture, and documentation. So if you remember the other day, we said Serverless 360's positions to try and add these last 20 or 30% of features that Microsoft tend not to really look at, but we want to add these things that give you the maturity to operate real-world solutions. And if we think of the BizTalk world, there's my pen. So let me just get my pen mode on. So if you think of BizTalk world, this was typically the capability architecture that you would have. You've got all these different boxes where you had different modules or features within BizTalk, and the positioning of Kovai's BizTalk 360 product down here was all about how can I make it so that we let you run BizTalk in the real world easily. My key question for today really is BizTalk easier or more difficult to operate in the real world than Azure? And I think that's a really interesting question. I think the answer is actually it's different. It's probably harder in some areas, probably easier in others, but it's certainly not as easy as we want it to be. And that's where I think we've got this position in for that equivalent of BizTalk 360 in an Azure integration world. So customers who had this architecture, some of them will still be back here where you're really just vanilla BizTalk. Some of them started moving stuff to Azure over the last few years. So we'd have things like customers who, that add this Azure solution at the top. You might have a website captures orders, drops them on a queue, and your BizTalk picks them up and processes them. That was people starting to extend BizTalk to the cloud. We then had the Logic App Adapter. So, we can remember it integrated a few years back. They introduced the Logic App Adapter, and you could send a call. And the big benefit was, BizTalk has guardrails that makes it difficult to add new innovations that are just fundamentally different to its internal architecture. But you can call out to a Logic app and extend into something like a Salesforce, which would be much more difficult to do straight from BizTalk. So that was the better together story we had a few years ago. We then had App Insights integration for tracking data. We had some features in BizTalk 360 to help people use that to make it easier to consume. And I think we find that a lot of customers for BizTalk probably are seeing a transition architecture from BizTalk to AIS, and they may be somewhere around this space today. You might not have everything on this diagram, but I would expect that a lot of BizTalk customers probably have a few Logic apps, maybe a few functions. A lot of them might have API management. Even if it's not necessarily used just for your integration team, you probably have it in your organization. So BizTalk customers will have Azure in their organization. It's really unlikely they don't, even if you're not using it for your integration platform just yet. This is the target architecture where I think most people in the room are going to want to get to. So we've got messaging with Service Bus, Logic apps for your typical EAI and workflow, API management. You probably have Data Factory for your ETL. Maybe you have a few human workflow things, so you might have Power Automate in there as well. So we've got this kind of decomposed, decentralized platform instead of an integration product, but we can do loads of really cool stuff with it. We just have the problem of how do we create that centralized governance and management. One of the great things about AIS to me is that it extends the people who participate in these technologies aren't just integration people anymore. So most of us in the room are probably over here. We're coming from BizTalk backgrounds. But actually, I was talking to a load of .NET devs last week, and I'm saying, look, you guys are building apps, and you might be using functions and API management. You might be using Service Bus. You've got these Power Platform guys who are using Service Bus. The key thing companies need to realize is that the skill sets underpinning these different things you build are common. So it's much easier to take a Power Platform developer who's learned how to do functions and service bus. They can help you deliver integration solutions. So your team before, where you had these one or two experts, can be complemented by generalists who've done stuff in other areas. And I think that's the big win for AIS. So if we come back to Serverless 360 for a minute, so let's think of our principles and positioning. So the challenge we had, we talked about this yesterday, so I'll not go over it too much, was the more we build apps and solutions, the more the support burden increases. We can't build new stuff because we're doing nothing but support. We build these 4 modules within Serverless 360. So yesterday we talked about BAM. Today we're going to talk mainly about these 3, although I am going to touch on BAM very quickly. And the aim was to move support left. The more we can let business users self-serve, the more we can let level 1 and 2 support people act on the solution and do stuff, the more we can develop new things. That's the whole point. If we do it well, Serverless 360 pays for itself because you've freed up your resources. So in terms of where we fit in this architecture, there's 3 areas that I think serverless is targeting. So we've got the management, the monitoring, we've got cost management, and we've got security and governance. These are 3 of the areas where I think we add value, and I think they're 3 of the areas that Azure has significant gaps. We found that from building our own SaaS platforms, and I think most customers are finding that they're not quite where they want to be. So the first thing we've done is guidance. So we've spent a lot of time in Covai. We hear the message in that both Microsoft have heard from customers, and we hear the same thing. People are struggling to get guidance on how to do migrations, how to use AIS. So we've put together this landing page, which is a collection of all of the resources that we've got, that we've produced, Microsoft have produced, and various community members have produced. So there's a single place you can go, and you'll be to get this, and it's grouped into different areas like DevOps. There's things like, the first problem is how do you convince your manager to move to AIS? So we've got some white papers about where's the value in the migration and all stuff like that. We've also got this webinar series that we did where Kent joined us, and Sandro and Lex and I did some stuff. So there's loads of resources in there. That's the place to go to if you want to get guidance. Okay, so BAM for BizTalk. The use case here is we showed yesterday, hopefully everyone really enjoyed this session, showing the art of the possible with BAM. We looked at Power Automate, Logic Apps and stuff. But if you're a BizTalk migration customer, if you can get that single view managing BizTalk as well as your AIS, then there's some good wins there for that transition journey you're going to do. So we don't want to reinvent BizTalk 360 into serverless because that doesn't make sense for us. We've got a really mature, good product there for BizTalk. But as customers migrate, we want to open the door so that you can use serverless 360 from BAM. BAM from BizTalk. Losing my mind there. So I think I've mentioned these points already. I'll skip that. So if you take an example architecture here, right, so I've got this demo. We didn't really cover it yesterday, but it's one of the few that I've got. We've got iDocs coming out of SAP. They pub sub to different systems, and we've got these little groups of interfaces here. So this is based on a real-world integration I've done where we load orders into Maximo, we load materials into Maximo, and with BAM we can have the different interface solutions can send their telemetry events, and that lit up all of the things we were seeing yesterday. Now, the idea is that if you're transitioning, you may have the same architecture, but you have a BizTalk app that would pull from Service Bus, and we want to be able to send BizTalk events to be able to do the same thing. And what we've done is we've added some artifacts in a pack for BizTalk, so we can add pipeline components where we can sort of have messaging coming out of here. So you can just modify your pipeline, add our component, put a bit of config in, and it sends messages to BAM. And you could also use it from .NET Code if you wanted to in an orchestration, and that would let you light up BAM with your BizTalk data. So here's a screenshot. So I was going to show a bit more of a live demo, but my subscription that has the VM in ran out of money this morning. It was working yesterday. I turned it on. I definitely turned it on. So this morning I went to turn it on and it was like, oh, disabled. And I was like, oh, man. So Aaron Prabhu got a screenshot from me. We just really wanted to show you what the pipeline config looks like. So this is the BAM connector added at the top, and you just add you tell it what's my business process. Do you want to save the message body, and that kind of thing. And what really ends up happening then is over in Serverless 360. So if I go into my BAM, so here's my business process. You can see all my service bus to Maximo, SAP to service bus. And I've got a few from a couple of days ago where I've got ones here, this BizTalk to legacy DB. So here I've got side-by-side BizTalk integrations and logic apps, both managed in the same thing. And on my shape, I can look at the details, and you can see here I've got my message body that came from BizTalk. And these are all the BizTalk pipeline properties, so all those context properties, it's just sending up here. And then you could do things like promote these properties, so you can search based on them and stuff like that, and you can create your own table here of what you want the interfaces to look like. So that we think that'll help people in this transition from BizTalk to Azure. You can create this joined up sort of business self-service. Okay, so this is the main bit I really want to talk about today. This idea of we're building on a platform, but we want a product to manage, and the customer wants a shiny box that they can look at and go, that's my integration platform. So my question about is Azure easier or more difficult than BizTalk? I think everyone nodded their head when I said that. They agree. Generally, it's just different. It's not easier. Some places it's more difficult. Some places it might be a little bit easier. But there's a need to be able to manage this stuff. And what we would do is, in our business apps here, we've got this solution. And what I would kind of say is maybe I want to manage that and these two from the perspective of an operations unit. That's what my support team want to see. They don't want to see the underlying low-level detail. They want to understand the groups to be able to manage it. If I've even put my lines on already, look. So this is where I'm going to just jump over to serverless and just freewheel a bit and show you what's in here. So on the home section, we're going into business apps. And the challenge, you've got this architecture deployed in Azure across multiple subscriptions, multiple resource groups. Everything's decentralized, defragmented. You can't just view what does it actually look like. That's the first hard problem. So here, we've got the tree view. I can start building out here's my integration area, here's my platform. I might decide I want a node for managing the root level platform, so I can put all my common stuff in here, like my service bus namespace, my APIM namespace. And then I can start building out groupings for apps. So yesterday we looked at the human resource area. So we had a single business process, so the business could self-serve them. But from a support perspective, I might create a node for my Active Directory integration. And in here, I've just said, look, here's my couple of logic apps, my service bus queues, the couple of API operations that work together to deal with employee onboarding into Active Directory. I might have an equivalent one for Exchange, SuccessFactors, etc. And that's the groups we want to manage at. If you notice here in my tree view, I've got this red bit because that's lighting up. So red and green is obviously based on the monitoring. So I've got active monitoring going on all these resources. And the ones that are unhealthy, they'll flag the tree up as red. Straight away I know which area of my architecture have I got a problem with. Here I can go in and I can see, here's my resource here. I can click on it and I can see it's actually disabled at the minute, so my VM's turned off. That helps me work out where the problem is. Now, you can do a bit more than that. So in my app here, so if I go and look at my iDocs one, I think this is one I've got the service map set up for. So you can, when you add stuff to the business app, we'll try and generate a service map. And also, actually, one of the really cool things as well is think of the effort it takes to set your monitoring up in the first place. You build your solution, you deploy it, and then you go, oh God, we've got to monitor it, and then you go start fiddling around with Azure Monitor, and like days later, you've got all these things, and you can never really find where the where the rules are and all that stuff. And what we do in serverless is you just add the resource. We have an out-of-the-box profile, which is the default monitoring you want to apply, but you can also build your own profile if you want to customize it. The minute you add the resource to serverless business apps, we'll start monitoring it for you automatically. You don't have to go and set up all that effort, you just add it. We also have a feature where if you're tagging your resources, you can say any resources with this tag, automatically add them to this map, and we can start monitoring without you having to do anything at all, which is quite cool. But the service map, we'll attempt to draw it for you, but then I usually find in practice, there's only so many relationships you can work out from the metadata in Azure, so I usually modify the diagrams so that I can tell the support person this is what it really looks like. So here, you'll notice that this actually looks quite similar to my diagram on the PowerPoint slide. So I can see I've got my service bus, my logic app, and I can click on them here, see the monitoring status, and if there was a problem, it would show in the diagram, the red bit would say there's a problem with that resource. You can ask a question.
Sorry, Mike. So can you give it some hints, as it were, using, if you tag your resources correctly in advance, can you kind of like help with those?
If you talk to that man back there after this, I'm sure it could. No, it doesn't at the minute, but so we work out things like what resource groups it's in. You can work out some of the dependencies between certain logic apps and stuff like that. So we can kind of work some of it out, but there's other bits where you just can't see those relationships. And there's also a challenge of some of them. You could work them out if you start mining into the code, but we don't really want to do that because that's obviously crossing a boundary where you probably wouldn't want us to do that. So you've got to kind of think how that would be implemented. So in serverless in this business app, right, what we're really trying to focus on is the added value features. So things that you might want to do here. So we've got, you've got logic apps, you can do stuff with them, but some of the challenges with logic apps are things like if I've got 100 runs, 10 of them failed and I resubmit them, then I go to the loo and come back, I can't remember which ones I've resubmitted. So it's quite difficult to manage that kind of thing. So we have these this action required tab here, and you can see I've got some errors on this one. So I can go through the ones in the action required tab and say, it's a to-do list of what you've got to do. So I can say, this one's been sorted out by somebody else, so I can just choose to ignore it, give it a reason, and that'll go away from my action required tab. I can choose to resubmit them, and the idea is you just try and keep your action required list empty because you've dealt with all your issues. That's actually quite difficult to do just in Azure of knowing have I actually got any outstanding issues or not. There's other features like favorite runs. You can also do things like override the monitoring, so you get the profile, which you'll notice up here, but you've got all these metrics and states you can configure if you want to take it further. So what our principle's really about is the more we can do to get your default monitoring configured with you doing nothing, the more time you can spend making those little tunings at the end, which is where we want you to spend the time. And at the minute, the problem is you spend a lot of time setting it all up that the tuning doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen until much later on. Okay, so in addition to those tasks we showed there, you can also at an app level, you can configure things like automated tasks. So we might find that, you go and resubmit your logic apps, you might find, oh, this one's always an error. So you could do a logic app resubmission task to run every day to automatically resubmit everything that failed. So we're trying in the automated task to look for those common support tasks people have to do, make it easy for you to just automate them and kind of not have to manually chase after those things daily. Okay, time-wise, so I'm just going to jump on a bit. There's a whole bunch of other features here. Actually, I think the one thing I do want to mention as well is, remember, Serverless 360 is not just about integration. So I've got my integration platform there, but I also have my data platform. I've got some custom apps. I've got quite a cool demo I'll probably do in some feature point about a lamp stack application. So we've got, modeled web app that uses front door. Actually, I think the service maps are quite cool on this one. So I've got a front door. We've got these availability tests we can configure so it can ping your endpoints. We've got my key vault, and the idea is that your support team certainly a level 1 and level 2, they're not just an integration support team. They support other stuff. So if you've got other apps built in Azure, they can support them all side by side. Okay, so cost culture. So we all know that cost's a challenge that's different from BizTalk to Azure. So in BizTalk, you probably spend a lot of money and then you deprecate your assets over a period of time. You might have software assurance maybe, but those costs are very fixed costs, whereas Azure, the big win's that it can be really cheap, but it can also trend up. And that can become a problem. And I would challenge people in the room, think this for yourself. How much is your Azure bill for integration today? Question 1, do you even know how much it is? Because I think I meet companies where most of the integration team don't know. And I think that's the first problem. They don't know, and they don't know that they should care. When did you last review your costs? And do you have any evidence that if I audited you to show me you'd reviewed your cost? I would argue most companies don't. Do you know that you're spending your money wisely? If your manager came along and said, what things should we do? How would you tell that manager what your plan is to keep your costs under control? The big problem here is a combo of visibility and awareness. So most of the time, the integration team don't have visibility of the cost data. And then the people who have visibility of the cost data have no understanding of the concept of your integration. So it's meaningless. It's just a number. They don't know if that's money well spent or money really badly spent. So we built this cost analyzer module. So we built, background to it is we built it for ourselves. We run Doc360 as a SaaS platform. We had this exact problem about managing our costs. We felt that Azure has some features, but there was a big gap for what we needed. We built Cost Analyzer for us, but we added it to Serverless 360 so it can be made available to customers as well. We're really looking at things like FinOps people and Azure experts to be able to work together in this cost culture to make you spend your money effectively. Now, one of the ways I've used this recently, if anyone spotted my blog, you would have seen this blog post I wrote about storage. So we've got a bunch of demo subscriptions that have got quite low budgets on them just for doing little noddy demos with. And I had a storage account with SFTP, and it was spending no money, and then suddenly it started getting charged for the FTP bit being enabled. And I got this alert on email a couple of days, and I'm like, oh, it's probably nothing. It'll go away tomorrow. And then I was like, oh, I'm 3 days in, and this hasn't gone away. What's the problem? And my alert was, you've spent $5 a day, which is the alert I'd configured. And I went and looked at Cost Analyzer, and I'm like looking at the data, and I'm like, oh, right, that's gone up. What's going on? And I kind of blew my credits and that. But you can see here, this is where I was troubleshooting this cost, and you can see where I fixed the issue. So what I actually did was I added an automation to turn on and off the FTP capability, which I did a blog post about. But in Serverless 360, the first thing we're trying to do, let's just take a look at the tool actually while we talk about this. So Cost Analyzer, again, we want to create this structure that you can customize to be whatever your organization model makes sense. So at the minute, cost in Azure is all based around resource groups, subscriptions, management groups, and that kind of thing. But that doesn't represent your organization. So you might say, here's the cost model for the integration team. Here's the cost for the public website. And in integration, I've kind of broken it down. So I can have areas where I look at API management, areas I can look at gateways, and that's where you can start opening up people to be able to see this. So my integration team could come in and look at these integration areas, and you can see, this is how much I'm spending. And the idea is you can create the graphs that make sense for your team and then share them with the team so you can all sort of actively see how things are going. So here, I've just got a simple cost by resource. I can do by resource group and just, kind of make it easy to build these graphs, save them, share them as a team. We also have other features. So I mentioned the monitoring. So I created a daily monitor where I set up a bunch of settings. I'm trying to remember where my default is here. So I configured a budget. So I can see, this is what you're spending normally. I can create a budget. So I've got, I think it's 400 rupees. There's the budget that I've got. And I can say, right, if you start going beyond that, you need to start telling me. The idea here is, think of the number of times a customer's gone, right, we've been in Azure for 6 months, we've got this massive bill, oh hell, what are we going to do? And you're trying to, you're at that point, the boat's already sailed. You can't make the changes to get you back to an efficient state without probably spending money and probably it taking a lot of time. The idea is if we're, with budgets, if we make it really easy, that whole democratization of cost, we make it easy for your team to manage your budgets at your scope. You hit these problems early and you fix them and you're managing them. And that's what we mean by costs, the cost culture. Rather than just thinking about it when it goes wrong, we start thinking about it all the time.
Mike, quick question.
Sorry, where's the... Oh, Nick, yeah.
Can you do the cost analysis down to the biz apps that you set up? See the cost for each business app that you're running.
So yes and no. So you add filters on these nodes, so you can create filters to be based around resource groups and subscriptions and that kind of thing. So you could make the same model, but there's not a direct relationship from the business app to the cost module. We think that, it's not to say there won't be someday, it's probably a good feature that we'll add, but at the minute we're seeing these as two separate things because we see some customers just want the cost bit, some just want the business apps bit. As we build out the features and we start, we've got a lot of stuff in here anyway, but we've got a good backlog of stuff we want to do. That might be a good feature request. Like the product's built based on customer feedback anyway, so that's the kind of thing we want to hear from people about. What are the problems you have with cost? That'll drive what the roadmap would be for stuff like that. But you could model the same model. It's just not like coupled in a way.
Mike, sorry, just a quick question. Can you, maybe the answer is yes or is in pipeline. Can you do cost forecasting?
Not yet, but that's a good idea. You could see, you've got the history when you set the budget up, for example. So we're trying to make it easy for you to see what it's likely to do. But I think the cost forecasting, I guess at the minute we're not looking at things like what deployments might you be doing. So your cost, you can see it from the trends, but we don't know that you're going to add a new resource next week that might totally change the cost. And I think that's the challenge about, the prediction. I guess we could project forward based on the current trend, but I think it's probably a good feature to add. But I think that the predictions got a lot of other things to think about.
Usually CEO, CFO, they're asking for forecasting.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah. So the bit that we're looking at a lot at the minute, we've got this optimization feature. So here I've got a demo with my on-prem data gateway. So there's a couple of things about things like right size and turning off and on stuff. And the challenge with doing that, you can do it through the Azure portal. You can script it, but it's difficult to script. It's difficult to maintain. It's difficult to manage. Often you don't easily, you need these expert resources to do it. So what we've tried to do is just make this easier to do. So here's my data gateway optimization. And the idea being, in non-production, I might choose to turn my VM off when we're not in the office because nobody's going to be using it. So what I can do here is I can see this is the effect of my optimization. So the red's what it would normally cost, the green's how much I'm saving. It's a big saving here, but it's quite a small demo. It's just that VM being turned off. But we can do it with other resources. So what I would be doing is I'd add my resources here, and I can add a list of resources, and I can say, what do you do with them? So the VM, I might choose to turn it off or on. You can add an app service plan, say, set it to a premium plan during the day and make it a basic plan at night, and those kind of things. And we've got a support for I think it's maybe about 10 different resource types at the minute, but over the coming months, we'll be adding support for more resource types as we sort of decide what are the things that we think are the best ones to tune. So to me, things like pausing a Synapse dedicated data warehouse is a good one. One of the ones that I'm trying to get Aaron to get the team to write would be disable and logic apps. So if we think about consumption logic apps, we've got this at the minute where we've got 100 odd consumption logic apps all polling service bus all the time. And if I can disable them at night, it's not a huge cost saving. I think it, like on a monthly basis, it's probably like maybe $10 a month per logic app. But if you scale that out, it's actually quite a decent saving. And those are the kind of things where if you can just go, here's the 100 logic apps, just add them, just go and do it for me. And what you would be doing in the settings here, you know, instead of all the complicated rules about scripting, we're trying to just make it simple. So all I'm saying is green means it's on, red means it's off or up, or, you know, scaled up versus scaled down. You just tick the boxes where you want it. And we think this, you know, if you want to do something really much more advanced, you would script it, that would make sense. But for these simple use cases that are just difficult to implement, that's our sweet spots to make this easy to do. So let's say you want to just shut down your web app, scale it up overnight or something like that. This is what Cost Analyzer is about. Okay, the next section is about documentation. So it's funny, Nino and I have been chatting a little bit about this outside. So we've got this module called Azure Documenter. So it's all about auditing, tracking, documentation. It's aimed at people like FinOps, CEOs, Azure experts. How many times do you get asked to produce a document about something to do with your architecture, something to do with your costs or your governance, and you have to go and write it and all that stuff? And the idea with Documenter is if we can just make the documentation easy to generate it on a regular basis. So if you've got compliance requirements and you want to do an audit report once a month, you've got that history of those reports. It's just taking away that, you know, like, let's face it, we all hate doing documentation in the room. We'd much rather write cool stuff. So again, that's the principle. If we can shift that stuff and make it easy to do. Okay, so we've got the Documenter module here. So you can see I've got a few different reports here, and what we'll be doing is we'll be adding more reports over time. So we've got a number of ideas about different kinds of reports we think people really would want to be able to produce. So I've got a couple of things like resource audit, security and compliance reports, and I've got a couple of examples here. So this one's the cost comparison report. So you can see, you know, the red stuff means it's gone up in a negative way, so the cost's gone up of these resource groups. Green means it's gone down, and you can kind of break it down into subsections and stuff. So the idea is, if your managers kind of look, I want to make sure we're keeping track of cost, we want some auditing of this, you can just have this generating the reports. Once a month it'll say, oh, here's the new report. You can go and check it, and you can just mine into it. We've got ones like resource auditing. So if you want to just get a snapshot of all of your resources, so imagine you've configured some resource groups and subscriptions you want it to look at, and it'll just do a snapshot of all that. There's, I'm not sure if I've got this report here. Actually, I think that's the cost one. So there's a compliance report as well, which is quite interesting. So what we do there is we're able to see policies, and you can define your own policies, and then we would be looking at the resources, and you can do a snapshot of what resources adhere to which policies and which don't. So I think this is really important. You know, if this is the bit we were talking to Nino about before. Right, let's face it, a lot of companies have already gone live on Azure with stuff that probably doesn't adhere to your policies and isn't compliant. How do you manage getting that back to a good place? So with the security and compliance piece, we can snapshot the reports once a month. You then have the motivation to see that report getting better, because your manager will have access to it. He could go look at it and go, that's not getting better, you need to go and sort some of these out, and you get it from red to green. That's the driver for the compliance report. And I think there's more stuff we could do based around those concepts. The last bit for Documenter is we've got this diagram feature as well. So if you think about how many times you're having a conversation with people in your team, the management, the support team, and you just have to go and get these diagrams. This idea is just really simple. I can pull the resources in. So these, when I build the diagram, it kind of pick the subscriptions and the resource groups, and then I can just pull the resources onto the diagram. So here's my integration platform, my lamp stack app here when it comes up. I just build the diagram with the resources from Azure, and I can put context in these notes around it. So the next time somebody wants to know about this app, I can come and just go, right here, let's talk about it. Let's tweak the diagram, and it's that easy central place alongside your support tool to make these diagrams easy to maintain and manage. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm just going to start wrapping it up now. So why do I care for BizTalk migration? So business apps, we want to let your support people run the apps rather than your developers. So developers are still going to do support, but we want you to do less support and let those support people who usually can't do anything, give them the tool and also take away the complexity, so we can let them do quite advanced stuff in a way that you don't have to navigate through the needle in a haystack of the Azure portal. That'll free your developers up to focus on this BizTalk to Azure migration and write code. For BAM, we let the business users self-serve. So again, it's about giving your developers more time to deliver new value instead of doing support. The other thing with BAM is create a positive perception of your integration solution. So Bart, one of the guys from integration team, I always love this comment from him where he was saying, actually one of the easiest ways to sell integrations to show the customer BAM, because they can see it and understand it. If you show them a logic app and you show them Service Bus, they don't really get that level of concept. So showing them that thing they can understand creates that positive perception, and it can make people start liking your integration platform. You know, the old joke about how people always hated BizTalk was really because they didn't understand it, couldn't see it, couldn't give it a hug to know it was happy. BAM lets you see what your integration platform's doing. Cost analyzer, so your bill's going to go up over time. Don't wait until it gets a big bill and people are getting shouted at before you care about cost. For your BizTalk migration, develop a cost-focused culture from day one. That'll help you do a good migration. Document, so you're going to have audit requirements. You're going to want to track. You can do it all by hand, or you can have us automate some of that generation for you. Also, we'd love to hear from you guys about what other reports would be useful, because I bet every customer in the room wants the same reports. So we've got ideas of ones we think that people need, but as I say, a lot of the product's driven by feedback. So, we can make your lives easier, but other companies might suggest something that helps other people. Key points. So Azure is about build. It's build solution built for developers. Serverless 360 is about running the solution. Serverless 360 is also not just about Azure integration, it's the rest of Azure, so that's why I put in my LAMP stack example to show you your support team can see the bigger picture. Actually, I'm just noticing there's a random BizTalk server on my slide here. I don't really know where that came from, but I feel like that's the kind of comment people are going to be saying a lot in their BizTalk migrations over the coming months. They've found random BizTalk stuff they forgot was there, so there's maybe a call back to Sandro's session earlier. And really, what does it look like? So BizTalk 360 was for BizTalk, Serverless 360 is for Azure Integration Services, and we hope everybody has a great migration journey, and we hope Serverless 360 helps you in that journey. And any questions, feel free to give me a shout or come and chat with us at the booth around the corner afterwards. Thanks very much.